And we are recording. I am Charles Perallo, and I'm here with the one and only Mark Cuban. How are you doing today?
I'm great, Charles. How are you?
Good. I hit 100,000 subscribers on YouTube this week, so kind of a good milestone number, and I'm interviewing you, which I think might actually be a bigger deal.
No, 100,000 is far more important.
I've interviewed a lot of people in the past, like Newt Gingrich, Joe Lieberman. I put you above them, so that's kind of a cool thing. But to just
Okay,
get
I'll
this
take it.
yeah, but you haven't been Speaker of the House, but you did win the NBA championship, so pretty big win there.
Yeah, I'll get another one, so we'll go from there.
But so just to get started here, I reached out about the interview about your new company, Cost Plus Drugs. So just to get started on this, I read the story, and apparently it all happened from a cold email, much like this interview.
Right.
And my question is, just to get going, what does a cold email to Mark Cuban look like that not only gets you to invest, but gets you to become a full partner in the company?
There's a first paragraph that catches my attention and is something that's of interest to me. That's simple. And, there's an old rule, the longer the backstory, the worse the deal. So it doesn't deal with, I was born here, grew up there, had this happen or that happen. It's just like bam, bam, bam. First paragraph, get to the point. I want to be a low-cost drug provider, whatever it may be. And if I'm interested, I, reply with a question. And if not, I hit the delete key. And that's it.
Okay, so I'm going to actually play shark for a moment because in a way you're kind of the entrepreneur here, and I guess I'm going to judge it. And I'm going to ask a question I think you would ask, which is what makes this different from GoodRx and other companies that are trying to sell generic pharma products on the market?
We are consistently the low-cost drug provider across the country. There's no clubs, there's no variability, and there's complete transparency on our costs. You get to see what we pay for a drug. We mark it up 15%. We charge $3 pharmacy handling and $5 shipping, no exceptions. That's it.
Okay, now why do you think that people are still paying so much money for name brand drugs when the costs are this high? Because right now, just looking at it now, generic drugs have taken the rise in the last few years. Like 10 years ago, they were about 55% of the market. Now I'm reading they're about 80%. So what do you think, is still causing that 10, 15% of people to buy, the name brand products?
Well, there's a lot of reasons. One is their doctors don't always recommend generics. Two, there's instances where generics don't work. Three, doctors write a prescription, they call it into whatever pharmacy they're using. And, the independent pharmacists typically will give you the best price. The chain pharmacies often will not. And so they might not even realize that they should ask for a generic, or that pricing on generics can vary depending on where you buy them and how the order is placed.
Okay, now this is more of a policy-driven question. So obviously with pharmaceutical companies, there's a massive amount of restrictions through the FDA. I believe the average cost of introducing a new drug is about $2.8 billion. The average time is about 14 years. And in the last 30 years, there's only been 450 new drugs introduced in the United States. Do you feel that, generic products are fair to pharmaceutical companies? I understand there's patents and so on, but what are your feelings on that?
Yeah, I think they are. I mean, look, this question has been asked a lot. What if the patent laws change? What will the pharmacy companies do? Well, they're still pharmacy companies, and those CEOs still make a lot of money. And so, they're going to stay in the same business. It's just like for the NBA. Ticket prices go up, go down, ratings go up, ratings go down. We're still in the basketball business. We're still in the entertainment business. And so I don't think it really changes anything. And the counter to that argument is the NIH makes significant investments in research and development. And a lot of times their research is licensed or conveyed to a lot of the pharmaceutical companies, and the taxpayers don't necessarily get a return, and there's a significant reduction in the cost to the pharmaceutical companies. I think I saw a study written a couple of years ago that said at that point in time of 120 single molecule drugs that had just been released on the market, 116 had started their research journey, if you will, with the NIH. And so there's a counter argument to all of that. But I think at the end of the day, pharmacy companies are still going to pharmacy, and they're still going to find ways to create new drugs.
And do you think there's a problem with the regulatory structure in this country where the profit margins on pharmaceutical companies are so high? Just for comparison, Amazon last year had a 7% margin. The pharmaceutical companies like Pfizer and so on, they're looking at years where they have 40 to 50% profit margins.
Yeah, it's hard to say. When you say pharmacy, that encompasses so many different vertical elements of the pharmaceutical industry. But when you get to manufacturers, there's so much distortion in the supply chain from the time a drug is manufactured to the time it reaches a patient. It's hard to know where all the margin comes from. And so, whether it's pharmacy benefit managers, whether it's wholesale, whatever it may be, there's such a lack of transparency. It's hard to give a straightforward answer on our margins too high or too low. And plus, most of those companies, Pfizer, et cetera, are in multiple verticals as well. And so it's hard to know where those margins come from.
Yeah, Governor Jared Polis of Colorado passed a law last year requiring hospitals to publicly disclose all their prices because, there's an issue where, my father was a surgeon for 25 years. There's an issue where, even the doctors don't know how much the hospitals are charging and they change every week. What is your opinion on that law?
Well, yeah, look, the CMS passed it, I think, last January 1st, right, where all hospitals had to post their pricing. And then when you go and look at it, you see that there are multiple different prices for the same procedure, and it's not just like per insurance company. There's multiple contracts per insurance company and then different cash price. I went to get a CT scan, and I went and looked at the pricing, and the cash price was by far the best, which begs the question, how is it that anybody can walk in off the street and get a better cash price than an insurance company can negotiate with a hospital?
So my question is going into the broader subject of healthcare as a whole. A couple of years ago, you invested into funding research for a new healthcare plan that was an alternative to what the Democrats and Republicans are offering. And it was kind of a play on Milton Friedman's healthcare plan, where, just to kind of make this for the audience, the pitch is that people basically get loans from the government for healthcare. The loans are capped at 10% of their income. There's a mild interest rate, and the most they can last is 15 years. Why do you think that's superior to what else is being proposed?
Well, a couple of reasons. One, first of all, one consideration you left out there, if you were making under 2 times the federal poverty level, you didn't pay anything, right? So and it was means tested so that lower incomes would pay 1 or 2%, and higher incomes up to a certain point paid up to the 10%, and above that a certain threshold, like at my income level, I would just pay fully and there wouldn't be a limit. And the reason I like that approach, and this was all pre-pandemic, was simply because you shouldn't be paying for my health care. And somebody who is making 2 times the federal poverty level or under shouldn't be paying at all. And it's really difficult to do a single payer system where there's so many uncertainties related to the government, right? I mean, I read Representative Jayapal's single payer approach, and the first paragraph, states clearly that the Secretary of Health and Human Services is basically in charge. And given that position changes on an ongoing basis, it's going to be very difficult to have any consistency from administration to administration. So I wanted to do something that was kind of a hybrid, where it took the best of single payer for those people who need it the most, and the best of a market system for those people who could afford it the most as well, which meant that you can go find the doctor that you wanted. There weren't networks. Administrative costs dropped precipitously because there weren't multiple contracts for insurance, plan. And it didn't preclude insurance companies from offering insurance as well. So if they could come up with a better solution, people could use their system instead, and so could employers.
Yeah, I ran a little basic math on that plan. It looks like the top 20% of income earners would still actually maybe make some benefit from insurance, because they're right now paying about 6 to 8% on average for insurance on their income, which is much less than, the more middle class people. So that might actually benefit insurance companies where, if you were in Congress or the Senate, you can go to insurance companies, hey, you don't have to, be worried about these people anymore. But you bring up the conversation.
But contrast that to the ACA with a 85% MLR, right? 15% of a bigger number continues to be a bigger number. And so the incentives of the payers and the providers are not aligned with patients, because there's an ongoing incentive to negotiate contracts between those two to increase the top line. And that's always at the expense of the patient and their costs, and to the benefit of the insurer and the payer. And that's just a huge problem. And so with my 10 plan is what I called it, the needs of the patient were aligned with the payer and the provider. If you do a good job, you can charge what you need, but the patient gets to shop wherever they need to shop, and there's transparency across the board. Data is not siloed, whether it's with the insurance company like it is now, or whether it's with the provider like it is now. So there are provisions to anonymize information so that we can get smarter about procedures, et cetera. So the whole key to the 10 plan was aligning the interests of patient, provider, and payer. And they're not currently aligned with single payer. They're not currently aligned with the ACA.
Okay, now in the conversation of US versus single payer, do you believe, countries like the United Kingdom, Germany, Canada have better healthcare than America does?
Well, there's a lot of elements. Now, I forget a lot of what I read back on Germany, but there's multiple tax limitations. I think you're limited to two general practitioner visits up until the time you were 30 that would be paid for. In the UK, there's budgetary constraints, but I think there's a lot to be learned from them. Like I did another study that we never published that's still in ongoing, as a matter of fact. And the premise was, look at hospitals in Toronto and compare those to hospitals in New York City. The real estate is more expensive in Toronto. You pay the same effectively for doctors. You pay a little bit more for nurses in Toronto. Band-Aids cost the same, et cetera, et cetera. And so, yes, budgets are set by the provinces and they have to work to those, but hospitals still try to be cash flow break even or profitable. So how is it that they're able to work, and what are the differences? And there's some very specific differences between the systems here and the system in Canada. One in particular is, they pay for malpractice insurance. And so, doctors and hospitals here always have that concern, and that influences their decision making. Two, there's multi-bed rooms. Here, hospitals, except for inner city and some government-sponsored hospitals, don't, they try to make it so, they're competing. And part of that competition is, okay, we have single beds and nicer rooms and this and that inherently increases the cost. If we were to say, okay, if you get money from the government, you have to have at least 2 beds in that room for X% of beds in the hospital, you're immediately going to have costs go down. Third, all costs are paid for in Canada. So there are nobody comes in through the emergency department, gets something done, and then all of a sudden there's no payment for it because they're uninsured. And in the US, there's the DISH program, right? But everybody uses their charge master to inflate all their DISH amounts that they supposedly provided for free to those in need, and that distorts, again, the economics. And I might be getting little nuances of some of these things wrong, but because I haven't looked at it recently, but you see the point that there are things that we can do that don't require a wholesale overturning of our system. But if we're just a little smarter, if we first make sure that our intentions are to align the interests of the patient, the provider, and the payer. And right now, I don't see that happening.
Well, first off, I want to say I think you're getting a lot of things right. In fact, I think there's some people in the Senate Health Committee who couldn't say it as well as you did in a few points there. But one person who I had a conversation with who's also a pretty successful entrepreneur is Peter Thiel. And Thiel is, a big fan of reforming the FDA, where his view is that this massive overhaul in the FDA is decreasing innovation. Do you believe that? And what would you like to see for regulatory policy on the FDA?
I don't believe that, because look, we're working on something with cost plus drugs, and we can take it to Europe and get approved. There is competition, and there is global competition, even though most countries rely on the FDA. Now, do I think there can be improvements? Yes, absolutely. Do I think, inherently the way we approach government services is efficient? No. I mean, I think the days of the old presumption of paper pusher behind a desk trying to slow down everything just to justify their job is starting to dissolve as we get into more government as a service and more technology. So yeah, I think the FDA can be more efficient. I think it can use technology better. Excuse me, I think it can use its resources better, but I don't think you just have to dismiss it.
Okay, so it sounds like you're definitely open to reform there, but you're not for the Peter Thiel approach.
No, I'm not. No, I'm not for just getting rid of all 3-letter agencies in the United States. I'm for, and I'm not even for cutting how much we spend. I'm for making sure we get results with what we spend and trying to integrate technology. So and people who understand technology, not technology for technology's sake. But if you look at at the technological expertise we have in government right now, it's a problem. And right now, I think whether it's healthcare, whether it's military, how we use AI, how we use data is changing everything. And if we're not capable of integrating those into the FDA and other agencies, we're going to have issues. We're going to have problems because personalized medicine in and of itself is based on it. And I think there's going to be look at the vaccines and how quickly they were developed and how important AI was to simulating the impact of the vaccine on the variety of different types of human body types, if you will. I don't think we have people who are experienced enough or who who are politicians who can understand and try to make the modifications that whether it's me or Peter Taylor, whoever you're talking to, would like to see.
Okay, so regarding public policy and your political views as a whole, I followed you for probably about 10 years on that, like just seeing the headlines and so on. You've read the book Atlas Shrugged 4 times. There was a statement about 5 years ago where you said, the GOP needs to drop the social stuff and focus on the economic stuff. And there were some comments where you seemed to align a little bit with Elizabeth Warren on healthcare, but then you weren't supporting single payer. So what would you say your political views ultimately are? Are they, it seems like a moderate libertarian, or how would you say it?
I have no political views. I just try to get shit done.
I like that answer. So I mean, now
if it were up to me, I'd get rid of both parties. My political view is get rid of both parties.
So,
and we're in better
if
shape.
If there was one person in the United States besides yourself you could make president right now, who would be your ideal person?
I have no idea. I really don't.
Okay, now there was that point in 2016 you were saying, Hillary or Trump, you'd accept vice president from either one of them to serve as the referee. Were you serious with that, or?
Not really. I mean, it was just fun to be part of the conversation because it was ludicrous on its face. That's just having fun with media.
Well, now regarding the whole tech side of things, so, right now, one thing, because you mentioned the military. So the military budget last year was about $750 billion. Comparing that, just to the conversation of healthcare, Alzheimer's, cancer, diabetes, heart disease, they got $20 billion combined from the federal government. And, NASA on top of that, I believe their budget was about 18 billion. Do you believe we're underfunding science right now?
Yes, dramatically, but it's not right to compare, those budgets, right? The real question is what works and what are the consequences of what works. If we're smarter with the military, we should be able to do it for less. But what does it take to get smarter? Again, with AI, there's two types of companies in this world: those who are great at AI, and everybody else. There are two types of countries in this world: those who are great at AI and everybody else. If we don't win AI, the consequences are enormous. And so while we like to say, we're underfunding or we're overfunding the military, it really comes down to, and I don't know the answer to this, what does it take to be dominant in artificial intelligence? Because in doing that, the trickle-down effect, to use a poor political term, is that we will benefit healthcare and, a lot of things across the country. Now, there's enormous risk opposed to pushing AI forward, and we also have to take that in consideration in the funding and how we develop things. But the underlying issue is, name the 10 politicians with the most power and ask them to have a discussion about this topic, and you're going to get blank stares.
So right now, I posted a poll this morning about artificial intelligence on YouTube. So it has 66,000 votes so far, and the question is, does artificial intelligence scare you? 45% of people said yes, 37% said no, 18% said unsure. What do you think of that, and why do you believe 45% of people are scared, and do they have a right to be scared?
Yeah, if you watch enough Terminator movies, you have every right to be afraid. But at the same time, artificial intelligence is still a function of human intelligence, and what we do or what we try to do with it. And the fact that, and the fear factor is, can it get out of our control? How far can we take it? And there's so many underpinning factors before we even get anywhere near that. You need to have enough processing power. Who does, right? You need to have enough time, because AI, to do it at the top of its game with trillion variable models, is time suck. It's enormously consuming. Do we have enough smart people to be able to do it well or not doing well? China, I think the stat is graduating more engineers than we have college graduates. And there's a trend here in the United States to tell kids not to go to school, even though we are trying to get more kids in STEM. We need to find ways to create more doctors, because that's going to impact the quality of healthcare. But back to the topic, to have enough high-end engineers that we can compete. And given right now we're not doing as good a job as we need to, and given the uncertainty and turmoil across the world right now, every engineer that we can import into the United States of America, I would be offering a job or offering, incentives for them to come here, because, America Inc. and America, our home, our country for our kids and our grandkids and our future has got to do better. And if it means bringing in people that make us better, it's just like for the Manhattan Project in 45, right? It wasn't American engineers doing the whole thing. It was imported engineers doing much of it. And we're facing, I don't want to say similar, because comparing an atomic bomb and the end of World War II it's tough to compare. But there are binary issues that we're addressing today and will address in the future, climate change being another, that are going to take brain power that we do not have enough of in the United States of America right now. And it should be a focus to, use the open marketplace, of America, and bring in people from around the world so we have the best and brightest. And it's, and that in turn will create more competition here, and our engineers and our graduates will be smarter as a result.
Well, you brought up immigration there. And what you're saying on immigration reminds me of what Kevin O'Leary was talking about when he ran for Prime Minister of Canada way back when.
You dig deep into the weeds, don't you?
Wait, I'm sorry, what?
You dig deep into the weeds if you know what he was talking about for immigration in Canada.
Well, what do you think of him? First off, quick question: what do you think of him running for Prime Minister?
It was a great challenge for Kevin, and I know his heart was in the right place. I don't agree with him politically on a lot of things. Again, not politically on certain issues and stances he takes, but more power to him. That's
I was looking because there was some talk about you running for president at the time, and there was Kevin O'Leary was running for prime minister. North America Shark Tank edition. That would be a weird thing to see.
That would be.
But for O'Leary, he was talking a lot about saying engineers in Canada, the first thing they do is they get their degree and then they move to America. And he was talking about policies to excite engineers to stay in Canada versus go to the United States. Right now, there are a lot of great engineers in Europe, Asia, South America.
Let's go back to that point. That's changing. I think that's 180 degrees from the 4 years ago when Kevin was running, right? Or now 6 years ago. Sorry. Now you see Google and Amazon and other companies who are really putting an emphasis on artificial intelligence, opening offices everywhere around Toronto and in particular Montreal, because they do have great AI and engineering programs. And, the country of Canada invests significantly in AI and technology-based companies through government.
What do you think the United States can do to attract more engineers from around the world?
Damn.
I like that answer. Do you think Donald Trump scared off some engineers from coming to the United States?
Fuck yeah, he did. Of course he did.
I like that. But all right, so right now, looking at everything from going back to the topic of AI as a whole. So obviously it seems like a topic that you have an immense passion for. What companies are you invested in? What are you looking at in the AI space?
Yeah, if you go to markcuban.com, you'll see all the private companies that I've invested in, divided by category. I'm doing less in AI now, simply because I've been doing it now for 4 or 5 years, and most of those companies are maturing more. And if I see something truly interesting, I'll look at it. It's still a passion of mine, as you said. Focused primarily on cost plus drugs as my primary, and I'm doing more in crypto. So, but cost plus drugs is my focus right now.
Okay, now on the topic of AI. Elon Musk has Neuralink, which is something, kind of interesting there, where the idea of becoming AI. What is your opinion on that?
Great. You know what? Our bodies effectively are made up of trillions of different variables. And each and every day, science uncovers a new variable or multiple variables that allow us to understand further the algorithm that is our body. And, to be able to connect into that and feed information or feed data and extract data and make decisions off of that. Yeah, I think it's a great idea. I think it's way, way early, but you got to start somewhere.
Now, on the topic of Elon Musk, this morning he came out saying he wants to buy Twitter as a whole. What is your opinion of Elon Musk and just the effort to buy out Twitter?
I'm a fan. I think, and I tweeted this. I think his effort to buy Twitter is just a way to fuck with the SEC. He came, at one point he said that he wanted to take Tesla private for $420, funding secured, I think it was. And then now he files a filing with the SEC saying, I want to buy Twitter at $54.20, $4.20 a share. But now he can tweet about it because he filed this stuff. And not only did he file it, but he told Twitter what he would do with his shares if they didn't, let him take it over. I don't think he really wants to take it over. I think, he just likes the irony of the SEC messing with him for tweeting that, and then 4 years later, filing with the SEC and now being able to tweet effectively the exact same thing that he wants to do. And so I think he's just playing it there. And in doing so, he'll probably make a lot of money because Twitter's got to take it seriously because, they want a white knight, a friendly, to own those shares of stock over Elon. And I don't think Elon truly wants to buy it. And I don't think Wall Street believes he wants to buy it because you haven't seen Twitter or Tesla stock move very far. Because the reality is, and I don't know Elon's finances at all, but he owns 17%, someone tweeted today, of Tesla, and Tesla's got about $1 trillion market cap. That's $170 billion. He's buying, what's left to buy of Twitter is, let's just say, $40 billion. So about 20, all round numbers, obviously, about 25% of his liquid net worth with Tesla. Well, he's probably buying it because he's not going to sell all that Tesla stock. So I'm sorry, he's borrowing against the Tesla stock because he's not going to sell it. And so if Tesla stock drops by 60, 70%, that loan gets called in and Elon loses everything.
I definitely see what you're saying there. And I also do think Tesla stock could go for a drop. The way I look at it is kind of a Netflix comparison where Netflix, they were surging. They beat Disney in 2020 stock market cap wise. But now, Disney with Hulu and Disney Plus, it looks like they're going to surpass them in streaming and they're no longer top dog there. Tesla, I could see having an issue where it looks like every company's making electric cars. So what happens when, Toyota, Volkswagen, one of these guys beats them?
It's just the market falls. You put aside the fundamentals, right, which are important at some level, particularly Warren Buffett, right, and a lot of investors. But if the market just craters, completely out of its control, you can have the best electric car, the best batteries, the best everything, but the market drops whatever percentage. We've seen a lot of technology companies that were big for the pandemic get crushed. And there's nothing that says that some period of time that Tesla stock can't get crushed. And Elon knows that. He's not stupid. And so he knows that there's some number that if his stock drops below that number, all those loans are getting called in and he loses it all.
Doing a lot of videos through TikTok and YouTube, one of those most viral things I talk about is like, celebrities and so on. That's probably about 90% of my content news there and sort of the business side of it. Hell, I've gotten about, I want to say 100 million views talking about Johnny Depp's marriage. But the one businessman who always gets a lot of views is Elon Musk.
Yeah, of course.
I look at it, Facebook is actually one of my largest stock positions personally. They have extremely high profit margins. Facebook actually.
I tell you to sell that immediately. That's like buying a tobacco stock company, a tobacco company stock.
Here would be my case on it. Their margins right now are higher than Apple.
Yep.
They still are growing where they went from 80 billion, they're at about 85 billion in revenue. So they're still growing at immense growth rates. They have a diversified revenue stream. And I think with a mix of e-commerce and WhatsApp, I believe they're going to grow. But,
I'm not arguing. The question becomes, do you want to buy a company that sells cigarettes that kills people? And Facebook doesn't sell cigarettes that kill people, but I think the way they approach their platform, I think, is just wrong. And I would never, ever, ever, regardless, they could be making dollar bills for a nickel and handing them to shareholders, and I wouldn't buy Facebook stock.
So, just to actually comment on that, so with YouTube polls, I asked people their opinion of Elon Musk. He had about a 60% approval rating on YouTube. Mark Zuckerberg had probably about a 5% approval rating. Why do you think that is?
I mean, you don't look at Facebook and so let me take a step back. When we have discussions in this country about the impact of social media on political discourse, just family discourse, just, ethics, just being nice, right? More often than not, the conversation turns to Facebook at some level. And underneath those decisions are how Facebook uses algorithms in AI in particular, and how they amplify discussion and discourse towards, whatever, and if some studies, or I guess some reports have shown that the more anger in the post, the more likely it's going to be amplified and the more people are going to consume it. And that's just not good in my mind. And so when people understand that, and they've been in situations where they've argued with friends on Facebook, where they've, particularly over politics or the vaccine, where, people that they've known their entire lives, they may no longer be friends with, or they've unfriended them or been unfriended. It's not a platform for the most part, in my experiences anyways, where people just say, wow, all my experiences on Facebook are amazing. And when you ask why those experiences take place, it goes back to the entrepreneur behind it.
Well, this actually relates to another poll I did on YouTube. I do a lot of polls, by the way, through the YouTube community page. And
Yeah.
40,000 votes in the last 3 hours. I asked people which website is most likely to last 1,000 years. 40,000 votes, only 1% of people said Facebook as the most likely. And just for the record, 72% said Google, 13% YouTube, 10% Wikipedia, 5% Amazon.
What about Twitter?
Twitter, I can only put 5 on the polls.
Oh, there you go.
So, yeah, I'm limited there.
I think Twitter's facing the same demographic curve that Twitter's facing the same demographic curve that Facebook has gone through, where it's just aged. And Twitter's demographic is starting to age very quickly. My kids don't use Twitter. My kids are 12, 15, and 18. They'll get reference there, or a link will go there at some point. They get most of their news from YouTube or from TikTok. Pretty much that's it. They don't use Facebook at all. They're embarrassed to even talk about Facebook. And I don't think, and they'll use Snapchat. I don't think that trend changes at all. And you're starting to see Telegram pick up more globally. So, I don't know that Twitter's future is, necessarily bright. I'm not saying it's going backwards or it won't be able to adapt, but I don't think Facebook can adapt. I don't think Twitter will adapt. I think it's TikTok's to lose. I think it's YouTube and Google's to lose. I think Snapchat is becoming more and more relevant depending on where technology goes, particularly with AR and VR. I think Facebook has blown it with their Metaverse shit. I think that's a huge, enormous mistake, because Mark Zuckerberg, Bill Gates once said that success can be your worst enemy. That once you have success, you think you're smarter than you are. And I've always tried to remind myself of that. And I think that's something that Mark Zuckerberg has fallen prey to.
What do you think Mark Zuckerberg did wrong when trying to approach the metaverse?
What is the metaverse first? Anything, this is the metaverse right here, right? We can, anything with multiple people that's virtual is the metaverse. There's no barriers to entry. You've got to be able to get critical mass. You've got to be able to do it in a manner that's compelling enough for people to change their behavior. I have a patent pending in virtual reality. I invented this thing for people's vestibular system. When it gets out of whack and they get dizzy, their eyes and their vestibular system and their brain can't align. So I put all this together into a whole VR goggles thing, and it's helped hundreds, if not thousands of people. So I have a great understanding of VR. And the challenge of VR is that there's no one application that people have to go back and use every day. We find a reason to use TikTok every day. I find a reason to use YouTube every day. Your grandparents find a reason to use Facebook every day. There's not a great reason to use VR every day, and that's that's the problem that Zuckerberg thinks he can solve. I don't think that by creating a metaverse where you're trying to simulate people's experiences and implement those primarily in a virtual reality goggles-based or glasses-based system is going to be able to work within the next 7 to 10 years minimum. And even they came out and said, AI was going to be part and parcel to making that all happen. And the reason is they hope that AI will be able to simulate reality. We've all seen fake people, virtual people that look incredibly real that are created by GANs and AI. They're hoping that you can simulate a whole universe and that they'll have custom chips that they've developed that will enable that to happen. I just don't see it. I don't see them being.
My opinion is this: as someone who, I label myself as a content creator, I think people are more and more interested in casual content versus being immersed in computers and so on, where, the reason why I focus on short form content instead of long form content is because that's the type of thing that's gotten me over 1 billion views in this space. And I do have a VR set and I do have Oculus and I've used it. It's kind of an occasion type thing. If I have people over and they want to play with it and do one of the games, that's fine. But I could never imagine myself, spending more than a half an hour on this. And I also look at it with gaming. The biggest games in the last 20 years, we have all these amazing systems, but, Candy Crush, apps, they're more popular.
Yeah, yeah, fruit slice, whatever it's called. Yeah, and look, if I was taking their position, they would say, we worked in the office, then we worked from home, and then when you work from home, you put up a background to hide where you truly are, so people don't know where you are and what you're doing. And a metaverse-based, VR-based system can do that better once the technology improves. But Facebook has no advantage there. Yeah, they own Oculus, but everybody's going to have pretty much the same access to the advances in technology, and it's going to be content based as to where people push into the metaverse. Like I invested in a company called Fireside Chat, and effectively it's a production platform that simulcasts to YouTube, LinkedIn, Twitter, Twitch, Twitter, etc. But it's also participatory so that you can have interaction. And it also works in metaverses so you can have avatars interacting. Because, like we're doing here with this and you see with your YouTube videos, there's no initial feedback. So if I say something about Elon Musk, there's no one clapping or booing. And even if you have a live audience, it's very difficult. You see people with Twitter Live looking at the scroll, trying to slow down and trying to make it interactive. And so, Fireside gives you that participatory impact and advances the platform. With the point being, in the metaverse, there's no barriers to entry to creating a metaverse, but the tools that'll be available to create content will create new types of interactions that I think will get some traction. I just don't think there's any chance it's happening in Facebook's metaverse.
Now, I have a question for you. So
Sure.
regarding Mark Zuckerberg, I look at it from a point of view where everything, I've done with community pages and videos, he has a very big likability issue. Do you think he made a mistake becoming so public as a figure where right now very few people on that Forbes, 400 list are liked by the public? In fact, I would say that you and Elon Musk are probably two of the only guys there the public would give a thumbs up on. But like looking at it, Larry and Sergey with Google, they chose early on to stay more private from the public life. In fact, I asked people one time, hey, do you guys know who the names of the creators of Google? I think 86% said no. Do you think
Right.
Mark Zuckerberg, part of the problem with Facebook now is he made himself so public, he became enemy number one?
No, because when he became public, the media landscape was completely different. Twitter may have existed as he became more famous, but it really wasn't the platform that it's become today. And social media didn't really have the impact that it has now, where people can just talk shit about everybody and anybody, or positive for that matter. And so I don't think he made a mistake necessarily. I just think, because the flip side is if he was just, doing things that people just saw in a positive manner, it would work for him. It's just that it's about what he's doing. It's not coming across in a positive manner, regardless of his personality or his media personality.
So you don't think the issue is that he just comes off as a little too awkward?
No, not really, because I don't think even to this day people really see him. I mean, he'll do some things that make you shake your head, but that's because I've only met the guy once. I don't really know him. And so he could be just the nicest guy in the world. He just doesn't do a good job of communicating. I just don't know.
Oh, that's interesting. I would have guessed over the years you guys might have run into each other a few more times.
One time.
One time. What about, someone like Jeff Bezos? You've met him before. I'm going to guess. You've only met Jeff Bezos one time.
Yeah.
Larry and Sergey.
One time. No, twice.
Okay. This one I think you'll probably have met more than once. Jerry Yang.
Jerry Yang.
Yang. My bad.
A couple times, but that was back in the day. I love Jerry.
Yeah. Well, I have to ask also, because going back, because a lot of people actually, because I was asking some people on YouTube before this interview what they were kind of thinking about you. Not a lot of people know how you really started out. Like one friend of mine, Mike, he actually thought, he was like, well, I thought he was only in the sports industry. I didn't know he was in tech. And I'm like, I don't think someone just wakes up and owns the Dallas Mavericks. I don't think I don't think he started off as like the janitor at the Mavericks and became CEO and owner.
Yeah.
But you started out with a company that was focused on education online. It was the computer education. Correct me if I'm wrong. Okay, you got to explain this one to me.
Yeah, so my first company, I got a job in Dallas at night as a bartender, got a job during the day selling software, worked there for 9 months, got fired because I wouldn't do the cleanup at the store and I wanted to go close a deal. Started my own company called Micro Solutions, and we became one of the very first local area network systems integrators in the country. And built that up, sold it to CompuServe, which is owned by H&R Block, taught myself the program, got really advanced into, LANs and WANs, local area networks and wide area networks and all that stuff, writing software for them, which gave us a great niche. Sold that, retired, bought a lifetime pass in American Airlines, party and traded stocks, did really, really good trading stocks, made tens of millions of dollars. And then in 1995, a buddy and I from college got together, and he was talking about, this new thing called the internet. And he said, can you create something, since you did local area networking and wrote software, can you do something that allows us to listen to Indiana basketball over this new thing called the internet? Bought myself a Packard Bell computer, second room in my house, went to work and trying to finagle ways to, we called it internet broadcast content, and worked out some things. There were a couple different software manufacturers, Zing and others, and we did some of our own, and then Real Networks, packaged those together and effectively created a company called AudioNet, which then became broadcast.com. And we were the YouTube of the mid to late 90s, up until 2000 when we sold to Yahoo. But literally, we dominated streaming. We had, hundreds of internet radio stations. No, we had thousands of internet radio stations, hundreds of online broadcasting stations. We owned 10% of a movie studio that we bought. We owned licenses to stream TV shows. We sold CDs, downloads, you name it. We did it. When Bill Clinton had the whole thing with Monica Lewinsky, and they released the tapes and all the audio, we streamed that and just destroyed the internet. I mean, all these things. We basically started the streaming industry and built the stream. We dominated it. And then we sold to Yahoo, and then the internet bubble burst, and Yahoo made the decision to cut back on everything, including what we were doing, and the rest is history.
So, comparing the tech bubble to today, so you started the company in 1995, sold it and sold it in 2000.
Right.
And the acquisition was $6.8 billion, if I'm correct.
5.7 in stock.
5.7, I was close. I got 1.1 billion off. You lose there. But so right now, how in a period of 5 years do you go from zero as a company, like just starting out, to 5.7 billion? And do you see that as something feasible that tech companies can do today?
Yeah, yes and yes. First, we started, I put up the money, the first few $1 million actually, and we started just grabbing all the content that we could. Literally every radio station, almost every radio station that streamed, almost every TV network that streamed, or TV station that streamed, we would break songs by Matchbox 20, right, that became hits. We'd have Willie Nelson selling his new CD and have his release party on broadcast.com. And so we dominated the space. And then we went public in 1998. And, at the time, it was the biggest first day jump in the history of the stock market. People, recognized that multimedia on the internet was going to be enormous. And at the time, when we started in 95, people would laugh at us. Oh, I have a radio, I have a TV, I have cable, whatever. But yeah, and so we were able to dominate that space, and Yahoo wanted to dominate that space. And then when the bubble burst, they cut back on everything. But could someone do it today? Of course, it happens all the time. I mean, not all the time, but it does happen. And so, yeah, if you find a niche, if you have something unique, if you have something that's differentiated and you can sell it and people, perceive it to be the best solution, of course.
So, one person who I had a conversation with years ago, who was also, a 90s tech buyout.com bubble guy, was Tony Hsieh, rest in peace, who, he started Link Exchange, pretty much out of college. He worked for Oracle, quit that, did Link Exchange. 5 months into business, they were offered $1 million. They went to New York City, took the offer, they responded $2 million. The guy said no. And then about, I want to say 4 months after that, Jerry Yang is offering $20 million for Yahoo to buy the company. Said no to that, took some investments, and I believe Microsoft ended up buying out for about $210 million towards the end of the tech bubble.
Yep.
What do you think was the key to broadcast.com's success in the early days? Like, how did you get those deals? How do you get, the Victoria's Secret fashion show to come on? How do you call up the people?
We were relentless, and we were the leader. It's like, why do people use YouTube today? It was the exact same reason back then.
Yeah, and Tony Hsieh, he talked a bit about that with me, and he was saying that, what he made a goal to do in the early days of, like Link Exchange, was trying to get back to every client within 30 minutes if they had a problem through email. And, he actually called, he always says, customer service is the most underlooked at thing in startups. And that was the entire way Zappos thrived.
Oh, without question, I'll give you the perfect example. Today, if there's a problem at lazy.com, right, I'm on the distribution email list. Lazy.com is a site that I built or I hired somebody to build to allow anybody to present their NFTs. Costplusdrugs.com, if there's a customer problem, I see the email. Mavs, if there's a customer problem, I see the email. We did NFTs with the Mavs. I go on the Discord and I answer questions. You know, you've got to. If the best
you answer emails from random YouTubers and TikTokers like me.
Yeah, exactly. Right. There's so much opportunity there because, you know, you always want to know how to kick your own ass. And the best way to do that is by knowing the problems your company's having. Now, I miss them sometimes, particularly on personnel issues, I've missed things. But in terms of technology and operational issues, you know, I've pretty well stayed on top of it.
Okay, now for the conversation of NFTs, because that's a space you're in, and I'm actually not a fan of crypto. So for my background in that, I actually bought in 2011 for Bitcoin. I was, I think, probably 17, 18 years old at the time, made pretty good money off of it for someone who was a teenager. And, you know, over the years, I've kind of fallen out of it where I'm just seeing I've seen so many scam coins pop up. And I sort of look at NFTs and I think that, you know, here's a legal way for large companies and artists to get in on crypto without having any legal repercussions of doing a coin. Sell me on NFTs.
On NFTs are just digital collectibles.
Okay, so your case to it is that, you know, you don't like, because, you know, I see like Gary Vaynerchuk's running around saying, oh, this is going to change the entire media market.
So let me explain my interest in NFTs, right? The beauty of NFTs, one application is digital collectibles, but the beauty of them is that they build on smart contracts and they have features that enable digital files to take on more value than in a physical form. So what caught my attention when I did my first NFT is that there's a little fill in the blank that says royalties. All right, if you sell a book and physical book, and here's Dirk Nowitzki's book right here. And so I bought my copy, and then he gave me one. And then, you know, if I resell this book, Dirk gets nothing. The publisher gets nothing. If this were an NFT and I bought it, Dirk would get at least the same amount. Resell it, the publisher and Dirk gets part of that resale. They get a royalty. That's a unique function that really got my attention, which led me to smart contracts. And the question becomes, what can smart contracts do on decentralized networks like Ethereum or Polygon or whatever it may be? And to me, that's the interesting part. And NFTs are just proof of concept.
Yeah, you know, there was actually an interesting moment when I was in Miami for the Bitcoin conference last year. I was staying on South Beach, and the girl in the hotel room next to mine was also going to the conference, and she was actually a former Playboy model, and she has 3 million followers on Instagram. And I follow her. Everything she does now is promote NFTs. She's not promoting her OnlyFans, not promoting like that. She's getting paid a ton of money for the NFTs. And I look at that and I'm like, you know, I'm thinking back to the movie Wolf of Wall Street when, you know, Leonardo DiCaprio walks into like the
But it's hard. You've got to determine what's the signal and what's the noise when it comes to investing and when it comes to the technology. Because look, go back to the early internet days, there were companies that all they did was create a website and tried to go public or did go public. And so that was all the noise that made people dismiss the internet, you know, quite often, you know, or you can't trust Amazon, you can't trust eBay. Why would you give them your credit card? You know, because there are all these scams and all these get rich quick schemes that were going on. It's the same with NFTs. It's the same with, you know, early days of any technology. And NFTs are still relatively new. And so there's a lot of hype, a lot of people pushing garbage, you know, just like baseball cards, just like comic books. There's, you know, just like anything that you can buy and sell or collect, artwork for that matter, posters. Lots of noise. But when you look underneath the hood, NFTs are just an implementation of smart contracts on decentralized blockchain networks, and there is a ton of opportunity and applications there. That's what I look for. You know, the NFTs were just, okay, that's fun, that's interesting. There are some unique things going on there, but that's just proof of concept.
So when you see something like, you know, the Bored Gorilla NFTs or things like that.
Yeah, the Bored Ape.
What a Bored Ape. What are you thinking on those?
Well, two things. One, it's just like artwork. You see a Picasso the first time and you're like, what the fuck is that? Right? But that's Picasso, right? Because the value is what people set the value to be. It's like collecting stamps. What's that stamp worth? Whatever somebody will pay for it. But what Bored Apes did that was phenomenal and really, really smart was, A, they made sure that a lot of celebrities got it, so it created kind of a cachet. So if it was like, it's like bling. It's digital bling in a lot of respect. What's the point of wearing a chain or jewelry, or fancy scarf, an Hermes scarf? Why? Right? Because you want people to know you have an Hermes scarf on. You want people to know you have all this bling on. And Bored Apes became the digital implementation of that. But part two is Bored Apes gave you the IP to exploit almost, not completely, but almost any way you want. You can sell your own line of t-shirts. You can do a movie with your Bored Ape. However you want to implement that, you can. To me, that was brilliant. That was a unique aspect of it that I think really helped create value. And now, my buddies, Guy Osiri and crew, have bought that company and now are going to be exploiting the IP in 1,000 different ways, created ApeCoin, which effectively is the dividend. So we'll see where that takes them and how well it works.
So with cryptocurrencies right now, which projects in crypto are you invested in? Which coins are you a fan of? And which ones are you not a fan of?
The ones that I'm invested in are Bitcoin. I own. It's a store of value. I mean, the Maxis love to argue with me. They see it the future of currency. I don't. Excuse me. But I do see it as a store of value. I think it's better gold than gold. It's rare that people actually truly take possession of physical gold. And so it's all digital. Gold is all distributed and ownership is all handled digitally anyways. I just think Bitcoin's a better implementation of that with more scarcity value. So I own a bunch there. I own Ethereum. It's kind of the OG of decentralized networks, and it's the host for the majority of smart contract applications and implementations. And to me, that's got a lot of upside, particularly as they transition from proof of work to proof of stake, which will drop their energy consumption by 99+%. So I think there's a lot of upside there. I own Polygon, which is what they call a layer 2. It's an overlay implementation of Ethereum. I own a token called KlimaDAO, KlimaDAO. And effectively what they do is they aggregate tokens that are connected to carbon offsets. So I can buy a KlimaDAO token, and in their treasury is BCT, which is something carbon tonnage. Each BCT token represents 1 carbon ton offset, low quality offset, but that's why it's selling for $3 or $4.25. But I can buy those or buy Klima and use it as a way to offset my personal or corporate carbon footprint. And so I think the tokenization of carbon offsets, which has a long way to go, but it will get better. This is just the beginning. And carbon sequestration and carbon removal, all these carbon utilities that I think have a place in going towards improving the environment. I think tokenization will have a place. And so KlimaDAO is one of the first ones I've dealt with.
And any cryptos you just don't recommend, you look at and say, that's a scam?
Yeah, there's a lot of them. I don't need to get doxxed, and blown out on Twitter by all of them. All you got to do is ask yourself, what are you using it for? So what's happened, there's an old Warren Buffett saying, first there's the innovators, then there's the imitators, then there's the idiots. We're at the late stage imitator, early stage idiot phase when it comes to tokens. And you have to ask yourself, what's the utility? What can you use it for? How is it being used? So there's a lot of them out there that may support smart contracts or multi-chain or this or that. And they tell you in the future that there's going to be all these applications, and they're using their treasuries. You're seeing it now because there's so much zero-sum competition among all the different blockchains. Not all of them are going to survive, and they know it. So they're paying a lot of developers to create different utilities, different applications for their blockchain. Most of them are just replicants of NFTs and then decentralized finance, maybe the carbon tokenization stuff, some games, but that's it. We have yet to see the real explosion in, call it the business process improvement, just like we saw insurance tech due to insurance or fintech due to finance, where it became a more effective, more productive way of doing something. I think we're going to see that with smart contracts. We haven't seen it yet, but when you go to invest in something, the first question to ask is there an application there that you need to use?
There you go. Now, on the topic of crypto, you've mentioned that you made tens of millions of dollars in stocks in the 90s. You were trading. What is your opinion on the stock market right now? Do you believe the current stock market is overvalued? Do you think we're heading towards a recession? What are your feelings there?
I don't think we're initially headed towards a recession. I think we're in a state of confusion where, because of what's happening in Ukraine with Russia, because of the supply chain issues, because of the full lockdown in China impacting supply chain issues as well, because of interest rates and the raising of interest rates. I just think we're in a state of confusion, and it's really hard to determine what the equilibrium will be. I basically own just a few stocks. My biggest holdings are Amazon and Netflix, and have been for a long time. I think, worst case, they'll go up in value at some point, but I'm in no rush to sell them. And I really don't try to mark to market every day.
Well, I apologize for not actually knowing this, but I now, your ethnicity, are you Ukrainian or Russian? I forgot which one.
They go hand in hand, right? So okay. My grandparents, physically, it's in Ukraine right now. 3 of my 4 grandparents. One was born in Melin, outside of Kiev. The other was born in Novosibirsk. My mom's dad was born in Novosibirsk, which is south of Odessa. And the other grandparent was born in Dnipropetrovsk, which they call Dnipro right now, that you see on the maps. So, but when they were born there in the early 1900s, it wasn't called Ukraine then.
Okay. Like looking at it, I was like, one of my most viral videos recently was talking about Mila Kunis. Her and Ashton Kutcher raised $30 million for Ukraine. And, she was talking about how for years she would just call herself Russian. Now she's identifying as Ukrainian. What is your feeling on what's going on there, Putin, Russia, and the whole?
Yeah, my feelings don't matter. No, they really, really don't. Neither do my opinions. And so, obviously, anytime you have loss of life like that, it's horrific. And that's all you can say about it, right? Certain of my companies are doing things to help, and, we'll do what we can.
Do you think there's going to be a positive outcome in this where, Putin does fold, or?
I have no idea.
Okay, so that's.
I certainly hope so, right? I have lots of hopes that all of it stops. Lots of understanding how horrific it is, and every time I see that the maps that they show, and I see where my grandparents were born, and or they show bombings in those towns, it hurts. But how I feel or what I think is meaningless.
So, what do you think of Vladimir Putin though as a whole?
Obviously something's wrong.
Yeah, there's one video I did. It has 3 million views on YouTube right now, and the title is Vladimir Putin stole a Super Bowl ring. Where I don't know if you're aware of the story.
Yeah, the Robert Kraft. Yeah, Super Bowl.
Robert Kraft
never gave it back.
I kind of am looking at it, and I'm like, this should have been our first indicator that this was going to lead to some problems. It's like, because the story is just he handed him the ring to show it to him, and then he just walks away with it, and it's like, Robert Kraft. I think he's probably just standing there like, no, I don't want to get the KGB on me. And, the George W. Bush had to call him too.
Yeah, I know. I remember reading that story. But, absolute power corrupts, absolute power corrupts absolutely.
Okay, so if you're doing this for about an hour now, I think we're getting to like a close here. But what I wanted to also ask is, what is, for people going on Shark Tank or people just emailing you, what is the number one thing you look at for entrepreneurs right now?
Before we get to the end, can we talk about cost plus drugs a little bit?
Oh, yeah, sure. Absolutely.
Okay. So yeah, what I look for, there's 2 things, because Shark Tank's, it's a TV show. And the reason I do Shark Tank is because it sends a message to particularly kids and teenagers that the American dream is still alive and well. And I want them to understand what entrepreneurship is. And I want them to get excited about business. And I want them to see somebody on that carpet who's from a small town somewhere who has nothing and came up with an idea and managed to get to Shark Tank and maybe got an investment. And so when that happens, when somebody comes on and, checks those boxes that, they are an inspiration by who they are and what they're doing, you're going to have a real chance of getting an investment from me. If it's just, a typical business coming in, someone comes in, hey, I went to Harvard, my partner went to Stanford, and this other partner, dropped out of high school and got a $250,000 Peter Thiel scholarship. They're going to have to be a real business that gives me a real return and really have something unique, differentiated, and probably makes me ask myself, why didn't I think of that?
Well, it's kind of funny. Well, the Peter Thiel scholarship was $100,000, by the way. But Also, just kind of I kind of remember that one time it was Coffee Meets Bagel, the dating app. Three sisters, they're all like Harvard grads. Do you ever like look at these people who brag about their degrees saying, I went to University of Indiana?
Hey, I do that all the time. Doesn't always make it on air. And by the way, those coffee and bagels, they like to do, use the PR to say, oh, Mark Cuban made us a $30 million offer. No, I did not.
Yeah,
No,
I had to ask you about that because one of
no,
my
I did
friends,
not.
well, because one of my friends I saw this morning was telling me they used the app, and I'm like, well, fun thing is I'm speaking to the guy who may or may not have offered them $30 million.
It was one of those things where sometimes people come on just for the commercial and they don't want to deal at all. So what I said was, if I offer you, I forget the exact words, if I offered you $30 million, what would you do? Right. Just to, it wasn't an offer, but I wanted to see if they were being serious about taking an investment in the show.
Yeah, I mean, and like by the way, when it comes to the whole like you call them Shark Tank babies, like just the commercial side of things, how do you kind of like feed it out if someone's looking for a commercial, they're looking for an investment?
I mean, you can usually tell, if they come in asking for $500,000 for 1% of the company.
Yeah, I mean, also one thing I had to comment on, this guy, I'm slipping on the man's name. There was a person who is a content creator online who does videos with his grandmother, comedy videos, and he
Yeah, they
came
came
in
on.
looking.
Yeah, they came on.
Uh,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
and yeah, the coffee business. One thing like I always kind of get bothered by is I hate the word influencer so much because people have called me that lately, and I'm like, yeah, I can barely pick out what socks to wear in the morning. I'm not an influencer. I like the word content creator. So like I'm seeing this guy who had to be like I'm guessing 30 to 35, and he's calling himself an influencer. I'm like, oh, that's like I don't use the word cringe often, but that's oh.
Yeah. And look, I never take anything away from any entrepreneur that's got the courage, one, to start a company, because every person in this country, if not the world, has that one idea that they think they can start a company around, and 99.99% of them don't take that step. How many people tell you that they could be a great content creator but don't create the content or don't put in the time, right? Because being a content creator, what you're doing is hard because it's relentless. You got to do it 24/7 by 365, and you really can't take days off. And, that made it a non-investable business from my perspective, but I gave the guy credit for just being
Yeah.
there.
Yeah, what I tell people is doing this, in the last year, because some people are like asking me for advice and so on and the stuff, and I'm like, well, guys, I've put out 1,200 videos in the last 14 months. It's not the easiest thing in the world to do. And
Yeah,
it's like, and look, I'm not a video editor. My videos are simple. I do them on my phone, but I've gotten a billion views doing them. And also, what do you think of the whole content creator influencer market? Just before we get to costless drugs again.
yeah, it's hard, right? It's not really an investable business as much as people try to aggregate content creators. You've seen people get houses. You've seen it on TikTok, right? You've seen all kinds of organizations. What was it called? Machina, I forget. Way back in the early YouTube days, right? It's really hard to scale because it is a brutal business. What you guys do is probably one of the hardest jobs. It's like being a musician, but at least with the musician, you release on a schedule or you tour or whatever, and it's scheduled. You've got people expecting content continuously with an unlimited number of alternatives. That is the hardest business in the world. Now, there's a lot of people, and I'm sure you've looked into a lot of this, trying to use DAOs and other token-based mechanisms to reward creators so that you're not at the mercy of YouTube and the percentages that they share, et cetera. I haven't dug deep enough into those, but it's something that I think, has a chance. I just don't know when that really could come to fruition.
Yeah, and it's like, with the whole thing with like being a content creator and, just if you're interested in this space, it's one of those things where we're still, I think, all kind of working out. Like I'm in one group chat where combined, I think we have about 30 million followers and we all reach 10 million people a day. But, I talk to everybody in it and we're still kind of figuring out how does this become more money? Like, I had a company called Stop Scrolling before this and, it was doing pretty well. So it's just kind of like, and recently things have kind of picked up, a deal from Showtime came in and, some pretty cool things have happened. But going
Congrats.
back to the top, it's some cooler stuff. Also, hey, I get to talk to Mark Cuban. So that's, you know how cool that is for me, by the way. I've watched your show for 10 years. So it's a pretty, awesome thing to say. But also just going back to the topic of cost plus drugs,
Sure.
and the topic of entrepreneurs as well. I think the first thing I'd like to ask is, and I had to check my phone just to double check the founder and CEO's name. Alexander, I am never going to pronounce this last name correctly.
Dr. Ashmayansky. Yeah.
Osh Mayeski?
My answer.
Okay, cool. So what about him did you see, what made him partner material for you, not just investing
He
material
is
partner?
smart as fuck. I mean, he is a radiologist, a real doctor. He is a mathematician with a PhD in math. I mean, when you look up rocket scientist, his picture's in there in the dictionary. He is that smart. He is that methodical. He is that detail oriented. He gets shit done. And he also had a pharmacy company, so he understood the pharmacy industry down to the most, the minutia of the business. And every time I asked him a question, he had just a direct to the point, in-depth answer. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I remember one time because my father is an orthopedic surgeon, and one time we were actually watching Shark Tank, and these two doctors came on with some sort of app to notify doctors. You went up and shook their hands, calling it the worst pitch ever. Yeah, and here's the thing, my dad to this day said that those two men embarrass doctors everywhere. And he sees because I've seen reruns of that episode, and my dad like almost kind of like, walks away from the room when that's coming on. He's like, I
Because you
can't.
every buzzword humanly possible,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
All they did was throw out buzzwords. I completely forgot about that. I'm glad you reminded me.
Yeah, it's like, I mean, it's an interesting thing. So this guy, no buzzwords, just facts. That's how it worked there.
Facts, facts, facts. And we launched costplusdrugs.com on January 19th. It took more than 3 years to get to that point, to get all the regulatory things, all the licensing issues settled, get the trust of manufacturers of the drugs to sell to us. And when we've launched, the impact has just been phenomenal. I mean, literally, we're selling now. We're past 200 drugs. We'll be well past 1,000, if not to 2,000 by the end of the year. But you can go to costplusdrugs.com, put in the drug that you happen to use, or your grandmother, your parent, a friend, whatever, and I promise you, we will be the cheapest source for that drug. We show you our cost. We mark it up 15%. There's a $3 pharmacy handling fee and $5 for shipping. More often than not, it's less than the copay for your insurance. Now, we don't take insurance because we can be so low that we're lower cost than the insurance company. So please, costplusdrugs.com and sign up and see if we have your drug.
Now, what is your opinion of Martin Shkreli and what he did in the pharmaceutical space?
Well, he was part of the inspiration for Cost Plus Drugs.
Thought so.
Yeah, because I asked Alex, Dr. Osh Mayansky, and it took me a while to get it right too. I asked him, I was like, look, if this dude can jack up the price of this thing called Daraprim by 7,500%, there must be so much inefficiency in the pricing of drugs. We should be able to do the same thing on the opposite side and cut prices. And he goes, you're right. And I'm like, well, how do we figure that out? And how do we get there? And that's exactly what we've done. You get to see literally there is no transparency in the drug industry. And people always ask, well, why hasn't somebody else done it? Because the real drug is all the money that's available if you play along with the game of the insurance companies and the pharmacy benefit managers and the big retail chains. If you play that game, there's money to be made. But if you don't play it, you're going to have a battle. And we decided to take on the battle. And by playing outside the middlemen and outside the incumbents, we're able to price this. And again, costplusdrugs.com, sign up, put in, test out the pricing.
There's going to be a link in the description on YouTube, by the way. I'll put it on the YouTube community page as well. And I mean, for Martin Shkreli, do you think he exposed some issues with the pharmaceutical space that you're kind of adding on to it as well?
Adding on? No, subtracting, hopefully.
Well, subtract. You're exposed. You're also exposing, but the opposite way.
For me, he exposed, when I see a distortion like that, and nobody responds to it as an opportunity to say, well, look, this guy's fucking everybody. This must be a great business opportunity. That tells me that there's something wrong with that industry. And it's not that it wasn't obvious, but at that point, this one dude can come in and, Shkreli can come in and distort it like that. There must be a real opportunity to come in and disrupt it the other way. And so, I owe him a dose of gratitude, I guess, if you will, because you're right. He did.
I'll send him a message in jail.
You're right. You send him some cupcakes, but and $1 for cigarettes. But he did show that there were real problems when you can just take a generic drug that has such a small demand that no one else is going to make it, jack up the price, and just literally ruin the lives of the patients that need it, and nobody does anything. That says a lot about that industry.
So 87% of health, so 13% of healthcare costs in this country are from pharmaceutical products. And there's a massive inefficiency there and things we talk about like the FDA day and so on. Now, what would you recommend? What do you think are the other inefficiencies in the other 87% going on right now? And do you want to disrupt those?
Oh yeah, I mean, first things first, right? We've got to win the battles we're in. But if you look at, hospital healthcare, provider healthcare, just basic distortion. So we talked early on about the fact that there's so much administration costs, right? 21% of the cost of healthcare are related to administration costs. And we talked about when prices are presented on the website, there's three different prices for three different insurance contracts from one insurance company. I think one simple thing to do would be to require a standardized insurance contract for every hospital to have to use. In the NBA, every contract is 99% the same, and just the numbers change basically. And the same thing should be with insurance contracts with hospitals. That would reduce the cost of administration significantly. How much, I can't say for sure, but that's a step in the right direction. I think requiring a certain number of rooms in a hospital to be multi-bed and charge less. I think that would be important. I can go back and rehash a lot of things we talked about, but there's a lot of room on a lot of distortion, and a lot of it is geared towards the payers, the providers, and the patients. Their interests are not aligned.
And do you think it's possible for a startup to come in and change these things, or do you think this is a more regulatory problem?
I think it's a little bit of both, right? So if I were going to start this, let's just say we solved drugs and I was willing to go after this. I think you can, using transparency, I think people will trust transparency. Right now, we trust the doctors that we know. And so we don't want to move away from your dad as an orthopedic surgeon, right? Little Johnny or little Susie breaks their arm or their hand playing, doing whatever. And we know, your dad. We know Dr. Peralta, right? So we're going to go there. And so trust drives everything because there's no transparency. We really don't know what's right and what's wrong and what's good and what's bad, particularly as it applies to cost. And I think a hospital or a center where everything is just right out in front. Here's what we pay for Band-Aids. Here's what we pay for rent. I'm not going to give you what we pay each individual doctor or nurse, but here's the total of what we pay or the average of what we pay. So you know exactly how we're doing what we're doing. I think that transparency builds trust. Along with the results. Here's the results that we're getting. We had this fuck up, right? It was awful, but da-da-da-da-da. Because I think that's lacking. And when you have a lack of transparency, as with drugs, that creates pricing distortion.
Now, right now, what do you think so you're saying the biggest problem with healthcare is you think there's too many conflicting interests? Because, it's an interesting thing because, I had a partner once who was a neurosurgeon. My father's a doctor, so is my uncle, all surgeons. They all hate, what?
What happened to you?
I started making YouTube videos. Well, actually, here's the thing. I considered being a doctor in high school. The person who told me not to do it was my dad. He looked at me and he said, "If you become a doctor, I'll never forgive you." Like,
well, that goes a long way. Okay, fair enough.
Well, his opinion was he was like showing the numbers. He said salaries down. It's like, and he said I hate insurance companies. But it's an interesting thing where it's like I've worked with some people in the insurance space. The insurance companies hate doctors and hospitals, and then I've talked to people in administration. They hate doctors and insurance companies. So it seems like there's three groups that all hate each other. How do you think they could possibly one day align?
Transparency. Yeah, transparency, because you've got to align the patients, the provider, the doctors, and the insurance company, the payers. They have to be aligned in the best interest of the patient. Right now, they're not. Your dad gets really upset because he wants, he busted his ass because he wants to help people. He wants to make good money doing it, but he doesn't want to spend 10, 20, 30, 40, 50% of his time dealing with administrivia. The insurance companies want the doctors just to be smart enough just to fix things in 2 seconds. And if it takes longer than 2 seconds, we don't want you to deal with it because we got to make our numbers as the insurance company, right? And so none of that is about, okay, how does everybody make sure that patient is as healthy as we can make them at its most cost efficient. And until those three interests are aligned, it ain't going to work. But I think with transparency, and starting in an urban area where you can get enough volume and critical mass, I think it could work.
Yeah, and
But
it
there's
doesn't.
not to have the bells or whistles. You got, with cost plus drugs. So there's no bells or whistles. There's no telehealth. There's no superstar doctor blogs telling you why you need magnesium in your diet. There's no this, there's no that. It is just the low cost provider, period, end of story. No frills. And I think if you did the same thing with a hospital, no frills, straight to the point. Here's the cost of everything. It's your choice. I think then people will recognize the benefit of that. And particularly for people who are always under assault financially and health wise for any number of health reasons, I think you're going to get those people as patients. And that's going to create enough critical mass and momentum for you to change the game.
Now, how big do you think cost plus drugs is going to get as a business? Because, right now there's obviously a certain, market cap to the pharmaceutical industry. And then, I think the shark that always kind of complains the most about, market potential is Lori Greiner. Because I always see her, she's like, I don't know why these companies come in saying we're going to do 20 million next year of nothing. What do you see as the next 5 years for cost plus drugs?
I mean, if we can add more brand drugs, then we turn the industry upside down. So it goes in one of two directions. Either we're enormous, and I don't even want to put a number on it, or we change the industry enough that they have to respond to our pricing, and we just piddle along there as the offset, so that if anybody else tries to raise their pricing, everybody knows that they can come to us. So either way, that's a win.
Now, what are you doing actually on a marketing front from this business? So what do you see as the most important side? Because a little bit of my background, and it's because something I'm saying. Are you trying to do social media? Is it interviews like this, or is it SEO?
No, it's just interviews like this and social media, my platforms, because we won't spend a nickel on advertising or branding, not a penny. And the reason for that is very simple. If you have a specific disease that we have a drug for and we are the low cost provider, the minute one person in that community finds out, everybody in that community finds out very quickly. And then it's just a matter of the early adopters telling everybody else that, yeah, you can trust us, that they deliver on time and the price is great. They don't raise their prices, et cetera, et cetera. And so because there's so much agita built on the pricing of drugs and being able to afford medications and not being in a position of choosing between rent, food, and medication, word of mouth is our marketing.
Okay, now how do you also pick which manufacturers for the product, which drug manufacturers to pick? Because obviously there's a lot of generics out there. How do you determine this is the best generic, the best price, the best delivery?
Yeah, basically quality of production and availability. Everybody's got to be FDA approved. We've got to do all the checking and all that kind of stuff that's required, and Alex handles all that side of it. But beyond that, it's primarily availability. If you've got pick a drug, right? And you can make it available to us, and our cost is relevant to everybody else's cost. We're probably going to be cheaper because we're only marking it up 15%. And so we just want to buy it from everybody who's qualified, who has drugs that we can sell.
So, looking at that, the 15% margin, why did you pick that number, by the way? Just that it came to mind?
Fair. It seemed fair.
Okay, cool. And also looking at like the profitability of other companies in the healthcare space, the funniest thing is we were just talking about like how all these groups are trying to fight for profit. I think it's more of like an inefficiency problem between them because health insurance companies, I believe, only have a net profit margin on average of 8%, which isn't at that high for publicly traded companies. And Warren Buffett, their biggest thing is insurance companies owning Geico and everything like that. The only type of insurance they don't seem to own is much in the healthcare space. So not a good business.
Well, it's not necessarily that it's not a good business, right? Because, there are restrictions on, you've got to be able to, by state it varies, but you've got to be able to spend at least a minimum percentage of your premiums that you take in from your customers. And so that by definition is going to reduce your net margins, but they play all kinds of games. And that's why, at least, it appears to be my opinion is that they acquire a lot of different companies in a lot of different areas. So they might acquire a pharmacy chain or they might acquire a pharmacy benefit manager because then they're just buying from themselves at inflated prices. And so the insurance company might have lower margins, but the other companies may be far higher.
Now, with this business, now it doesn't seem like for this company you'll ever envision yourself putting the CEO hat on. I think with Alex, it seems like he's there. But now, the last time you were really a CEO to a company, to my knowledge, was broadcast.com. And in a way, the Mavericks, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, even somebody else has always run the day-to-day of the Mavericks other than me.
Do you ever see in your life again a position where you're going to put the CEO hat on, do the day-to-day, or you're happy with this?
Yeah, I mean, I like doing the way I do it, and plus, it gives me the time to enjoy the Mavericks, but more importantly, enjoy my family. People have to work to my schedule. I don't have to work to theirs.
And that's why you're never going to run for president.
Exactly right.
And now
Exactly.
you did wear a jersey one time saying 46 after
That
Trump
was just
won.
to fuck with Donald Trump, though. That was no particular reason.
If you were to see Donald Trump again right now, if you run into him at an event and you sit down with him, how would that conversation go?
Oh, it'd be easy. It'd be high and cordial and everything. I mean, I'm easy to get along with. I don't hold grudges or anything like that. I wouldn't vote for him, but that doesn't mean, I wouldn't be cordial and be nice. No reason not to be.
I think in the 2000s, I saw an interview with you, like it was something that you're talking about wealth in America, and you were saying, part of being wealthy is you want to always upstage people. It's like knowing that I can walk into the same room as Donald Trump and write a bigger check than him.
That was just to fuck with him. Yeah, that was just to mess with him. Yeah, that
Yeah,
was.
I feel like for you, if Elon Musk, who's worth about 200 billion, walks into a room, I don't think you'd care at all. I feel
No,
like
no,
I feel like I feel like Trump, if like Bezos or Musk walked in there, like I would have loved to see the Michael Bloomberg versus Donald Trump debate because I would have loved there to be just a moment where Bloomberg goes, "I'm way richer than you."
yeah, no, it'd be great, right? And look, you go through different stages. I don't need to make more money. I'm the luckiest motherfucker in the world as it is. As long as my family's healthy, everything else goes good from there. But there are some people that really feel like it's a scoreboard that they have to keep on keeping score every minute of the day, and they want to move up the Forbes 400 list, et cetera, et cetera. That's just not me. And I like to. I'm at the point in my life now where I like to disrupt things, and I like to have an impact, and I like to enjoy my family.
Well, looking at it, let's look at Bill Gates for a moment. A lot of people would probably call his biggest achievement Microsoft, but one thing he's invested a lot into was toilets, actually, and the idea of water-free toilets. And I wrote an article about a couple of years ago saying I think in 100 years Bill Gates is going to be remembered more for that than Microsoft.
Of course he will. Of course.
Now, in 100 years, what would you want people to remember you for?
I hope it's the cost plus drugs and anything else I do in healthcare.
Oh, so not the Mavericks?
No,
Not Shark Tank?
no,
Not broadcast.com?
no.
So that you wanted to be changing healthcare.
Yeah.
Okay, now I think this is going to be the final question just to wrap things up because final question was was supposed to be a while ago, but you one time said if there is a luckiest man on earth, it's you. Why do you believe that?
I mean, I wake up every day just wondering how the fuck did this happen. It wasn't like this was preordained by any long stretch of your imagination. It wasn't like it was a straight path. I'm just grateful that I get to experience it, but I don't take it for granted. And it's just amazing to me that it did happen. I can give you 1,000 reasons why, or 1,000 reasons, 200,000 reasons why it shouldn't have. But it did. So I'm just grateful that it did.
And you said once before that you believe if you were to start from scratch tomorrow, be 25 years old, you could become a millionaire again, but you're not sure if you can do a billionaire.
Yeah, billions take luck.
You
really
seem to have it.
Well, I mean, you only have to be right once at scale, and then you look smart at everything. Yeah. So I busted my ass, the whole story, slept on the floor, ate fried mushrooms at, happy hour.
Ketchup and mustard sandwiches.
Yeah, the whole thing, right? I mean, I've been broke. I've had to get, the credit card cut up. I've had the bill collectors chasing me down. My first car in Dallas when I got to Dallas, I only got because I saw a car abandoned on the side of the road. And I'd been so used to having bill collectors chase me on loans and everything else. I knew that car was abandoned because they couldn't pay the bills. They couldn't pay the loan. So I opened the door. It was an old messed up Trans Am. And I saw it right there. There was the loan papers. I called the bank and I said, this is no lie. I called the bank. I said, if you guys have a car that was abandoned, and I read the name and everything. They're like, yes, you got it. I'm like, yeah, here's where I am. I'm like, can I make you guys a deal? Can I take over the payments because I need a car and I don't have credit to get a car? And they were like, sure, you saved us money. And so that's how I got my first car in Dallas.
Yeah, I've had kind of like some similar moments over the years. Even to this day, I kind of like, have sort of those things where like I remember a few years ago, there was a deal coming in and I'll put it like this, over 50,000, under 100,000 was the payment. but my actual bank was horribly in the red. Like I was horribly broke at the time. And a bill came in for $40 I couldn't pay for a hosting fee. And I had a check coming in that was, I want to say like over $60,000 expected in the next 2 weeks. I called up the company and I'm like, yeah, I'm dead serious here. I'm gonna have the money in 2 weeks, but for the love of God, can you give me another month here or something? And they were like, yeah, they actually they followed that. And I was like, I think my landlord was kind of in the same boat too. And like because and there's a lot of entrepreneurs going through that, and also a lot of people in the social media space as well. Where I talk to people, they've got 2 million followers on Instagram, YouTube, and they told me they barely paid rent last month. So
that's part of being an entrepreneur,
it's the fun.
I'm a big believer that when you're broke and your back's against the wall, Damon John from Shark Tank calls it the power of broke. That's when you have to figure it out. You can't just there's no off ramp. You've got to figure it out. My first company, Micro Solutions, I told you about. There's a woman that worked for me, and she took 82 of $84,000. Renee Hardy was her name. No. She literally went to the bank, whited out, this is back in the day, whited out the payee of our payables checks, our vendor checks, wrote her name on them, took them to the bank. The bank cashed them. Her name written on top of whiteout on the check. The bank cashed them. The bank calls me up and says, son, we have this lady driving through the drive-through that just, cashed these checks. I'm like, you didn't cash them, did you? He goes, yeah, of course we did. We're a bank. We had to call up all those vendors and beg them to, hold on till we figured out how to pay and put us on a payment schedule. We were that close to being out of business 2 years in. I mean, literally 82 out of 84,000 gone. But, it made us stronger, made us smarter.
Yeah, speaking of Damon, I actually almost ran into him recently. I'm from a town called Rock Hill, New York. It's near Monticello, the Catskills. Yeah, he's always up here, and like there's sometimes it's like I'll walk into like a restaurant and found like hear that Damon left 10 minutes ago, and I'm like, damn it. I'm like,
he's a good guy. He's a great. Yeah, he's got his chickens up there. He's got his farm. He's got all that stuff.
Well, no, my friend Butch, he always like talks about him. He loves the guy.
Butch, the big guy.
Butch Resnick.
Yeah, the big heavy set guy that's like looks like straight out of a mafia movie.
Yeah, he's a pretty cool dude. I love that guy.
He's a great dude. He came to Shark Tank and visited. He's great friends with Damon, right?
Yeah. He's kind of like an epic guy. Like I sort of always say he sounds like John Goodman a little bit with a voice.
Yeah, that's exactly. We're talking about the same guy.
Yeah. We're talking. Yeah, Butch. That's it. His last name's Resnick. But he loves Damon, and I'm like, someone was because when I told this, a couple people at the interview, was like, you're gonna get Butch to get you Damon. I'm like, if I can cold email Mark, I can cold email Damon. I'm gonna like.
But if you're friends with Butch, I mean, Butch and Damon are close, and so if you just ask Butch, he'll.
I see him probably like every week around here, like so. I've known him for a while. I've known.
I love him. Yeah. I've been around him a couple times. He's a good dude.
I'm gonna have to actually send the I love Butch thing to like there, but like I'm gonna shoot him a text on that, but but anyway, so I think, we can get going here right now. And thank you for being on. This obviously means a lot, the 100K mark this week. And I know you were saying 100K is more important. I'll be honest, this phone call, like an hour and a half with you this is why I do this kind of stuff.
Well, it's because you did a good job. Otherwise, I would have cut this shit short.
Okay. I'm good. So I passed the interview test. I passed the I'm not a shit interviewer.
Yeah, it was fun. I enjoyed it. I really did.
Cool. And best of luck on Cost Plus Drugs. And with that, I'm Charles Perallo. We're ending. Mark, say goodbye to the audience.
See you guys. Thanks.
All right, cool. And we're going to stop recording right now.